صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. It's always a blessing and an honor to see the mu'minin and mu'minat here on this blessed Friday night or Thursday night. And may Allah accept all your a'mal and may answer all your hajat and have mercy on all your loved ones, inshaAllah. Before we get started with the speech tonight, just wanted to make a couple of very quick announcements. This Saturday, inshaAllah, we'll be having a majlis for the shahadat of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. This Saturday, it will start promptly at 7 o'clock with prayers, inshaAllah. The following weekend after that, on October 1st, Sunday, we're going to announce this, we're going to send an email out, but on October 1st, there's going to be a picnic for the Masjid al-Nabi, the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi. It will be on Sunday, October 1st, and there will be more to come, but look out for an email for that, inshaAllah. And I believe, Saeed, there's a youth night, right, this Saturday? Not this, next Saturday, next Saturday. And next Friday. And not tomorrow, next Friday, inshallah, will be a youth night. So stay tuned for that, and that will also be in our emails. And without further ado, please help me in welcoming our esteemed scholar and brother, Sayyid Abbas Razavian, with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. It is great seeing everyone again, alhamdulillah, and may your acts of worship, your mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam in the month of Muharram and Safar be accepted. The month of Rabi brings us, the first of Rabi is a day where they remember Sayyidah Fatima al-Ma'asuma, the sister of Imam Rida alayhi salam, daughter of Imam Kadhim. And also we'll be remembering during the 8th, the shahadat of Imam Hassan Askar alayhi salam, that we have a program specific for this on Saturday. The topic that I'm going to be talking about tonight is about the account in its detail, al-hisab. So in the Day of Judgment, there are different stations, and the Day of Judgment is different than this world. That's why we said maybe we believe that Barzakh provides us with a purgatory, a way to get into, a way that we can come into another life which is much different than this life. And after we talked about the questioning of the grave being raised again, the hereafter, the Day of Judgment, has different mawaqif, has different stations. We said that in the Day of Judgment there will be no shade except for a person that had provided shade for someone else. And in it there will be much questioning. And the first question that happens and that we ask is, who will do the accounting on the Day of Judgment? Who is going to account for our deeds? Well, obviously it's a very easy answer to say Allah, and that is how we have in Quran, وَهُوَ أَسْرَعُ الْحَاسِبِينَ. He is the swiftest in taking account. Also we have traditions that some of this accounting will be done by the angels. And also, we have reports related that Allah will take the account of His prophet. And the prophets will take account of their vicegerents, and that they will in turn take account of the ummah. So that our accounting according to this tradition will be done by the imams. This is another tradition. So therefore we see that this, is in some of the traditions, and some say this verse, the traditions we have, that surely to us is their returning back, and surely upon us is the taking of their account from the imams we have, that the imams will be accounting for us. We have also similar traditions about this, that when events happen and when we perform actions, that also the imams are informed and also the prophet is informed. And then Allah is informed. There's a chain that it goes to the imam of the age, to the imams, then to the prophet of Allah, and then to Rasul, then to Allah. Then when something affects us in this world, it goes first to the prophet and then to the imams and then the imam of the age. These are also, it's very interesting to know that this presentation of action, which I just mentioned now, is not only limited to the Shia. The Sunnis also have presentation of actions to Rasulullah by their own traditions. Whose account will be taken? Now there are other divisions that some of our scholars have, and they say that maybe you can divide into different categories. The first category is the category that those that have never done any sin. For them, there's no account because they have done nothing wrong. But sometimes when we think of this, we think that, oh, maybe that's me. Immediately, because we love ourselves so much and we always think that we are so madloom and oppressed and always the right is with me. I do nothing wrong. I'm never wrong. I'm never ignorant. I'm always right. And that's, one of the qualities of the nafs, because we have hubbun nafs. We love ourselves. But we see that, God forbid, that there's many things if somebody were to analyze you. And some of our scholars say that have someone else analyze you, like have a scholar of akhlaq analyze you, and see what remains from the intention, from the action. Imagine going to a teacher of akhlaq and a faqih, a jurist, and you present yourself to him. And he would go one by one. Just first, do you know how to pray completely? Do you know how to fast? All these. And then go within the intentions. And then go from haqqullah, and we'll talk about this, to haqqun nas. Dear brother, dear sister, when we talk about the questions asked, one of the first mawaqif of places that we go to, one of the earlier ones, is salat, the mawqif of salat. They ask about salat. One of the other mawaqif that we have a lots of problems, or maybe we have the most amount of problems, is the haqqun nas, is the relationship we had with people. And how did we treat them? All of these are part of a person sinning or not. That is where we have problems, because we are living with each other every day. We are living with our family, our friends, with society every day. There is the day of justice. If we have performed dhulm to someone, it has, for example, the Prophet of Islam mentions this narration, that do you know who the muflis is? What's muflis in Arabic? Bankrupt, right? Who's the bankrupt? Imagine today I ask you, who's the bankrupt? You say, the poor brother that never bought cryptocurrency when it was cheap, for example. No, not that brother. Who is the bankrupt? The brother that has no money in this world? No. The Prophet mentions then in the narrations, that person that he comes to in the day of judgment. He has performed his salat, he has performed his wajibat. And then it comes to the mawaqif of haqqun nas, and some say this as mirsad. Some say that this is also mirsad, where they take madlama, or the dhulm you do to people. There, they say, look, you did this wrong to this person, give me your good deed. He gives his deed. He gives his reward. Then you did this oppression to this other, for example, brother or sister. They take more, they take more, they take more, so much so that that person does no longer have anything more. Because how does that person on the day of judgment become satisfied? By having good deeds. They say, well, how great that is. Okay, maybe they did dhulm to me, but give me the reward of that ziyarat, for example. That's a very good, that's a very good reward for me for this dhulm that you did to me. Give me the reward of your prayer. Give me the reward. That person in this tradition now is muflis, has nothing. Question, what happens when they run out of good things? Now they have to take and acquire the sins of the other. Now they say, okay, you don't have any sin, but you did dhulm to me. It's the day of judgment, the day of justice. Now this haram that I did, which is fire, now you take it. I'm not going to take it anymore. You take it. That is the only way. You can wait. In the day of judgment, you can wait. That's up to a person to wait for haqq to happen and for that idalat and justice to happen. They can wait. But I assume most people would prefer taking from the other because of what they see on the day of judgment. The tradition has that even if you have the actions of 70 prophets, what you see on the day of judgment, you will be afraid. So they'll take and take and take. And just like in this world, when it's very attractive, imagine right now I open a suitcase. I go to downtown or something like this, and a suitcase full of, $100 bills. And start showing everyone how much interest there would be. Would I even be able to come out alive, maybe, or come out with my money? No. Everyone loves money. Everyone loves cash in this world. But the tradition has that in the next world, we'll be interested in amal. It'll be just like this, like money. If I put money in front of everyone, they'll be rushing. But in the hereafter, we'll be looking for good deeds. So we'll be taking and taking and taking when you did dhulm. And the Prophet of Islam says, do you know who is bankrupt? Who is muflis? That person. He came to the day of judgment. He had so many good deeds. But he kept ruining it. He ruined someone's reputation. He didn't control their tongues. He kept making rumors up. Kept causing two people to fight, for example. He was harsh with people. The opposite you see when you have good akhlaq. That person is bankrupt. So the first group is that group that has nothing. Imagine tuba, lahum, for a person that has no sin whatsoever. But again, don't be naive when it comes to this. Imagine you go to the traditions and you see how strict it is. The second group are those that are pure kufr, enemies of Ahlul Bayt. They did dhulm to the clearest sign of Allah. Imam Ali alayhi salam is mentioned as Ayatullah al-Uzma. He is the greatest sign of God, the clearest sign of God. Why? Because if you want to see God, you see God in the creation. And if you want to see the creation, what is the best creation is insan. And from insan and humans, the best of them are the Prophet and his noble family. The greatest sign of Allah they did dhulm to. They saw, they heard, they knew the knowledge, they saw the beautiful action, they saw all the miracles, all the karama, but yet they still chose to fight against them. They will also enter heaven and hell without any question. Then the rest of the groups are those that have good and those that have bad, and they weigh these. Some of them will be forgiven. Some of them, as we have in the narrations from Shia and Sunni, the Prophet will come and will do shafa'ah and intercession, and God will forgive their sins. Others, their sins are so terrible they have to be punished for a while, thousands of years, and then finally they'll be released from the hellfire, and some again that they will be in the hellfire. So from this you understand that one of the stations that we have and the hard things that they ask is about the way that we treat one another. I want to show you actually, maybe here there's a question some have. What about the treatment of animals? We said about people. Do you think that we will be punished for the mistreatment of animals? I know that those that have pets here are all saying yes, yes, of course, yes. But those that don't have pets, will we be punished for the mistreatment of animals? Let me share with you some narrations. The Prophet of Islam saw a she-camel whose knees were tied up, this is in Bihar, carrying a load. So it was tied up, it wasn't going anywhere. But still it had a load. They were bothering this animal. And the Prophet mentions in hadith, where is the owner? Tell him that he should prepare for the lawsuit tomorrow. That ghadan al-khasuma. Khusuma, because that animal will complain on the day of judgment to that person. You put such a load. Okay, it's fine to put a load and you use that animal how people normally use it. But to put a heavy load on that animal, possibly a hot day or whatever, and just to have him sit there and I don't care. Another tradition, the Prophet said in this narration, Al-Kafi, لا تضربوا الدواب على وجوهها. Do not hit animals on their faces. فإنها تسبح بحمد الله. Verily they are glorifying Allah. Do not hit animals on their face. When you read these traditions, sometimes you read, and also it is the time of the attacks of the house of Sayyidah Fatima. You think of when the Prophet mentioned tradition not to hit animals, but how they mistreated his own family, how they mistreated his beloved daughter, think, and what they did to her during this time period after the 28th of Safar, multiple attacks on the house of Sayyidah Fatima. Then we have from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, this is from Makarim al-Akhlaq, Inna imra'a udhibat, it says, udhibat was chastised, fi hirra, for a cat that she had tied up and let it die of thirst. She was chastised. So we have in the traditions not only animals, even baqa or land. There's in some of the traditions too, mistreating land. So you see how careful we have to be with treating animals, humans, and creation altogether. Muslim has to be one of those that is the most conscious when it comes to these things. Question that I'm asked, and I was actually at a center, and they told me last year, do you remember the question they kept asking you? Kept asking me about animals and what happens to them in the hereafter. Kept asking me, will these dogs, my pets, will they go to heaven, will they go to hell, where are they going to go to? So let's also talk about this because we talked about animals. There are traditions that talk about from Abu Dhar, from Majma al-Bayan brings this, that Abu Dhar one day was in the presence of the Prophet, and in front of them 2 goats hit each other with their horns. 2 goats hit each other with their horns. The Prophet asked, do you know why each one hit each other? His companion said, no. The Prophet said, but God knows why. And soon will judge between them. Soon will judge between them. So according to these traditions, that even the amount of injustice that animals do for one another, there will be on the day of judgment some retribution, some types of, justice that will be served within animals even. But because obviously they don't have a soul from our understanding, they don't have the soul like we do. It doesn't have that, to last forever. That is, one of the qualities of insan, that he is al-hayy, he's always going to be living, that they're not going to be, everlasting like insan will. That's from my limited amount of knowledge, but it appears to be right. So here, Allama Majlisi, after bringing different narrations about the accounting, he begins a hadith as to why Allah questions us. Why would Allah question us on the Day of Judgment? Is it that He doesn't know and He wants to know? No, that's not the reason. He actually says, the scholar says, because for the hujjah, for the proof to be finalized, the proof to be final, so that you yourself can testify, you yourself can know what you did. It says that Allah, in the narration, Allah asked two questions that cause everyone to be speechless on the Day of Judgment. What are the two questions that everyone becomes speechless? One is, أَكُنْتَ عَالِمًا? Did you not have knowledge? For example, this was wajib, salat, you were supposed to pray it every time. Sometimes you prayed, sometimes you're on vacation, you didn't pray anymore. Sometimes when you were at university or at work, it was too hard. And the sun was setting, you say, okay, I'll do the qada of it later. What will you answer? And I'm asking this to myself, and the purpose of this is a reminder for us that after this week that we had without these reminders, so that hopefully by next week we can keep this hadith in our minds. أَكُنْتَ عَالِمًا? Did you not have knowledge? Did you not know? Well, obviously here that person that didn't know anything, okay. They were mustad'afin, they didn't know. But you know, you knew. Or you had the chance to ask. You had the opportunity. How many times they told you in the mosque, in their center, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone need any help when it comes to these things? How many times did they ask you? The second is, Halla amilta? Then why didn't you do it? Then why didn't you do it? How will we answer Allah on the Day of Judgment? So actually, one of the ways the Quran says that we will answer is by our limbs, not necessarily ourselves. Maybe we can answer ourselves according to some other narrations. But the Quran in Surah Yasin, Al-Yawm nakhtimu ala afwahihim. That day we will seal over their mouths. You can't say anything. Because in this day, why do you think, what is one of the purposes of sealing the mouth? Because in this life, we're used to justifying everything. We're used to lying. We're used to defending ourselves. But imagine a day. The day will take us, and obviously a very hot and difficult day. You know, once there's other tradition that the Prophet of Islam takes Salman and Abu Dhar to gather firewood. When they gather firewood, it mentions that he gives them a currency, a dirham, for example, a dinar. He gives them some money to go shopping. They come back. The Prophet of Islam, of Allah at that time, he had heated up the stone. And he wanted them to stand on the stone, the story has, while they explain what they did with this money. This first one was Salman. He sits on this fiery rock right out of the firewood. How hot is it? Could you stand on something like that? No. And he stands up really quick and says, Anfaqtu. For example, I spent it in the way of Allah. I gave it nafaqah. I gave it for charity. Very quick, and he jumps off. Okay, nothing happened to him. There, Abu Dhar comes and stands on the stone, and he was explaining at that time what he did with it. He bought some for this, he just spent it in this for his house, he spent it there, he spent it there. By the time he was explaining all of this, it was too hot for him, he had to jump off. So the Prophet mentions that the Day of Judgment is in this way, that when they're questioning you, it's not going to be, in a way we understand that it's not going to be like this nice room with this nice temperature that we have now and the weather is cool. You're in a 75, 72 degree weather. It's going to be very hot. Some mention that it will be on the Sirat. And the Sirat is not over the hellfire, it's in the hellfire in a way. That we will be burning. And that the rich, when they explain, they will need, it says, 40 camels of water come for them to drink because it was so hot. To explain how they spent this money, So the moral of the story is, if you spend it in the right way, yes, very quickly, I spend it this way, okay, you're gone. But if, God forbid, you spent it on things that either were haram, or, for example, you wasted the money, or in terms of israf, you did, in a way that it was too luxurious for your lifestyle, for example, then we'll have to answer that in detail, how Imam Ali alayhi salam mentions that in haram, there's iqab, in the halal, there's hisab. And that time we'll be answering. So you see that Day of Judgment, اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. So we will seal their mouths, because this day I can lie, I can justify, but I can't justify them. Their hands will speak. Their feet will testify about what they used to do. Three different opinions about how this will take place. Some say that the body will be conscious, and the body in the day of judgment will begin to speak. Some say that no, the body is not conscious, but Allah will command it to speak and it will speak. And some say that no, each part has the effects of the crimes. That crime, for example, from my hand, that crime, for example, that feet that went into a haram gathering I was not supposed to, that hand, for example, that took the haram riba or haram loans, was not allowed. That has effects on it. And those effects will manifest. Some say this is the third, that speaking will be this way. To give you some hope, there's some tradition from in Al-Kafi, from Imam Bagha alayhi salam, that for the believer this won't take place. This is not for the believer, the true mu'min. Their hands will not be testifying against them. They won't be ruining their reputation. It says, لَيْسَتْ تَشْهَدُ الْجَوَارِحْ عَلَى مُؤْمِنٍ from Imam Bagha alayhi salam. إِنَّمَا تَشْهَدُ عَلَى مَنْ حَقَّتْ عَلَيْهِ كَلِمَةُ عَذَابٍ فَأَمَّا الْمُؤْمِنْ يُعْطِي كِتَابُهُ بِيَمِينِهِ. So this tradition mentions that actually for the mu'min or the true mu'min, there won't be that testifying. So you don't have to worry about your limbs. So therefore, to conclude tonight, that we have this day in front of us, the day of Hisab, the day of judgment, and that sometimes you have the imams talk about give a salamat from mirsad, this day that they will ask, especially when it comes to the way that we treated people and the details. The purpose of this, all of this, is that this will give us that ability to act correctly in this world while we have a chance. And if we have harmed anyone in this world, you have another chance right now. After this, hearing this lecture, after hearing these hadith and verses of Quran, you have a chance to come to them and ask for forgiveness while we are alive. When you look at some of the statistics, and these might be a little old, you look and you come across how much crime exists here in the US. You see, for example, that in comparison to Europe, which is also a Western civilization, in the US, maybe a homicide is something about 5 times the amount. People killing each other. What is the worst sin than this? Taking someone else's life. Quran mentions, and one of our scholars was talking about this, that no article in the United Nations Human Charter, no statement from any other religion gives the sanctity of human life as how Quran gives it. What does Quran say about the sanctity of human life? Whoever kills one person, as if he has killed who? Everyone, Jamia, all of nas. One person is equal to, say, 6 billion, 8 billion people, or even more, maybe even those that have died. And if you give life and you save one person, as if you have saved all of humanity. Not a religion, not any group, organization has come up with a statement even close to this, that one is equal to 8 billion. That is the sanctity of human life. Yet we see homicide in this country 5 times that as much as Europe. Other, things, sins, rape, for example, you see 7 times higher than Europe. These statistics might be a little bit old. Robbery, for example, in the US is 4 times higher than in Europe. How can these issues be solved? These are major crimes, even lesser crimes. How can we as a society, and we want to help the country that we live in, how can we help them to help the madhlumin and those that are oppressed? By talking about the Day of Judgment, by talking about the hereafter, talking about fear of Allah, talking about huquq al-nas, talking about accountability. The first thing that these talks should do, should resonate in your hearts, in your minds, when you hear what a tough time you'll have. And the awliya of Allah would cry about the Day of Judgment, is that it causes you to collectively be very careful about one another, let alone do a major crime against another person. This is the way that society can be saved, by belief in the hereafter, proving it by your mind, belief in God, belief in the hereafter. This will cause us collectively to live in a society that we are very careful. Imagine how careful you are of things that you're afraid of. What are you afraid of? For example, if I say there's a snake here, for example, or I say there's a scorpion or a mouse, for example, I don't know, whatever you're very scared of. How you walk in how much precaution you have. When you hear these narrations, you are in the same way. I don't want to harm anyone. They're talking behind someone's back. I don't want to hear it. I don't even want to hear that ghaiba. I don't want to hear what you're saying, because I don't want to be muflis on the Day of Judgment. When a believer in a mu'min really believes in these narrations and verses, it causes them that accountability, that they're responsible. If they're a teacher, they're responsible to the students. If they're parents, they're responsible to their kids or to the family. If they're employee, they're responsible for that work. What a beautiful society that would be, one that is the society itself felt and believed that they were accountable. And how terrible a society or culture is that there's no more belief in the hereafter. No one is watching them. They can get away with anything they want as long as the law enforcement doesn't catch them, for example. The other issue that we see, and we'll end tonight's speech with this, is that this gives us also affects an individual life. Belief in the day of on the Day of Judgment, it causes a person, as we said, to make sure that they live their life in a way that they're serving God's creation. One of our scholars was asked, what would you do in the last 30 minutes of your life? And I said this other times. He said that I would come outside of my house, and he lived in Najaf, and said I would come outside. He was a marja, a scholar. He says, whoever needs help, I would help them. The last 30 minutes of my life. Look at it this way. Look how much forgiveness you can get, how much rahmah of Allah you can get when you help others out. Irham turham. Have mercy, and mercy will be upon you. So this causes us to actually be in a way that you want khair for everyone. And this is a goal that the believers should reach, a high position. Not that, God forbid, we want to harm someone. Someone can harm people, okay, that's terrible. Someone can be neutral, okay. But then someone can be a helper, a well-wisher, and always keep their brothers and sisters in dua, always be in a way that they'll be willing to help them and to teach them, to support them. And know that this is their religious duty. This is one of the best ways to come close to Allah, to reach that taqarrub. One of our scholars read all the traditions. They say Sahib al-Jawahir al-Kalam read all the traditions. And he said, from all the hadith, I came to the conclusion that nothing is beneficial as much as crying and mourning for Imam Hussein. But also I came up with other narrations that is basically equal or higher than this, and that is serving the brothers in Islam, serving, say, sisters in Islam. So therefore, I hope that these discussions are eye-opener for us, and that we can live in a way that, inshallah, on the Day of Judgment, we are not muflis. The last part I want to talk about, a few sentences just about Sayyidah Fatima Ma'asuma, one that also cared very much about huquq al-nas, cared about the Day of Judgment, when she made that trip from Medina all the way to Marv, which is modern-day Turkmenistan, as a woman that was alone, was not married at that time, they say, but to take this dangerous trip and the oppression that they would give to the Alawis, to the Saadats, and she would come and say, I have to visit my Imam, I have to visit Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam. And you see that because of the sincerity she had, because of the position that Sayyidah Fatima had, Al-Ma'suma had, you see that multiple Imams talk about how important it is to visit her, and how a person will reach heaven that visits her with ma'rifat will enter heaven. And you see that that title Al-Ma'suma, this is from a tradition from Imam Rida alayhi salam, mentioning her as Al-Ma'suma, infallible. When an Imam calls someone else infallible, they truly have not committed a sin. And that she reaches a position that actually in probably our most advanced hawza that we have today, that for years the hawza of Qom she has been the center of the seminary. That all our top scholars, our ayatullahs and our maraja have been at the service of Sayyidah Fatima Ma'suma. And they believe that many of the things that they have is from the barakat of this holy lady. Inshallah, maybe Allah give us the shafa'ah, inshallah, of Sayyidah Fatima al-Ma'suma, and give us, inshallah, her ziyarat. May Allah protect us from the day of judgment, inshallah. Protect us from our hisab. Give us a very easy hisab in the day of judgment. Ya Allah, from our haqqullah that we have, forgive our haqqullah that we have not completely fulfilled. And when it comes to haqqul nas, forgive it if we have. Allow us to ask for forgiveness from the people, inshallah. Ya Allah, cure the sick, help those that are poor, those that are suffering, and expedite the return of the Imam of the age with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala